I like the morality too, because both Jake and Harold have religion in their background, right? But then they're sort of they're having questions of faith or questions of morality, and then their adventures, kind of force them on a journey of choosing different things and whatnot. So I love that. I guess maybe sound like I'm jumping. Well, no, let me get to the connective tissue. There was about the villains. Really cool sort of utilitarianism that I see show up as some of the villains, which is a great thing. I mean, if these are government men, for example, or even some of the individuals in Shelley, at one point, one of the lines is, at least America will be the strongest, superpower or something like that. And I like that theme of sort of the collective versus the individual that shows up in the books. These are just things that I kind of resonate with when I'm reading a story. So, but again, you just kind of organically, that just shows up, and you don't really think about that too much.
I try to give every one of my characters their own moral center, which might sound odd for a villain, especially if they're trying to wipe out millions of people. But they do have their own moral code. They do have their own beliefs. And like in the ship books, I remember in the first ship book, there was a character called Reese, who was a military guy. And I don't like it when a lot of books like crap on the military and this and that. So I really gave him a heart and soul. He had done bad things, and I talk about that. But he also, there's a scene where he's talking to a boy, and he says something along the lines of, parents die for their kids, not the other way around, or something, which was directly related to something that happened. The boy had to do something bad to an adult. Yeah. And he did that to save himself. And Reese was like, I was trying to show that he was an honorable man. The ship was, that whole series, every single one of them is all about trauma. And they each face trauma in different ways, because the ship is sentient. The ship is alive, and it communicates with the people, and it projects images in their heads, and it can screw around their heads. And I think it's just trying to communicate with them, but it does it in a way that our minds have trouble processing, and it brings up a lot of trauma. And so every character in the ship trilogy is dealing with trauma in some way, shape, or form. And in the third one, she's trying to forget the trauma, and that you'll see that when you get to the third one. But in the first one, the only character that is not affected by the ship is the military guy, because early on in the book, you see a flashback where he was going to commit suicide and he didn't. He chose not to, and he had a reason for not doing that. Yeah. And then when he gets into the ship and the ship starts screwing with his head, he knows it's not real. He's already faced his demons. And I like the idea of the military man being the person who had already faced his demons and was the one person who was not directly affected by the ship. So, I do try to have a certain level of morality to all my characters, including my villains, that they all have some sort of moral core that I can resonate with, because I think that actually makes, like, again, we were talking about Thanos, that made him more interesting, that he did have a moral core. It was screwed up and, all that, but he had a belief system. And I find villains or antagonists with a belief system, or heroes, obviously, that if they have a strong belief system, that I, as the reader or the viewer, can completely say, I get that. I get where he's coming from. That makes it 1,000 times the conflict, 1,000 times more interesting. Yeah.
Even McClellan in the Ship's Revenge, when I first got to him, I thought, oh, I'm not going to like this guy very much. He's one of those or whatever. But then you're like, no, I really appreciate this guy, where he's coming from.
He wanted to live up to his dad.
Yeah. I like that. Also too, you said that your points of view or whatever is one of the things you really kind of focused on with your novel writing. And I mean, Shelley, we have Shelley's point of view, her interiority, and Jake's. Yeah. And I remember when I was first reading Shelley, and I got, was opening up, it, not she, everything you said. And I'm getting to know Shelley a little bit through her actions. And I'm thinking, really interesting character, but how invested am I going to be in this machine that's talking about the human parts of her are annoying or whatever, Right. But that's not the case at all. I mean, I am 100% engaged with her, and you've got a really neat way of doing it, where it's like, she's, even in insisting that she's a machine and not human, she understands the way people are thinking, and she even, on one hand, not having people skills, she's able to manipulate people, like, with knowing their psychology and stuff. So it really is a cool little
contradictions is a great way to make a character interesting. Is that if they contradict themselves in some way, not like verbally, but just like sometimes what they say and what they're thinking is a little bit contradictory, because people are contradictory. And I think the more advanced machines will get, and the more closer they get to humanity, they'll start to have some contradictions, especially if you're able to start imbuing them with emotions, which is problematic, I think. and that's one of the it's throughout the series that becomes more problematic.
Yeah. Well, I've got more questions, and we've definitely got plenty of things to fill the space. But before we do reach too far, then I do want to look forward to Murder Mind a little bit. So we do know that Shelley is in this new transition or era of her existence that you've talked about. It's really, that's gonna be cool to find out. But Jake you've teased, I think, even in the blurb or whatever, Jake's still a part of this book, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Well, their partnership, that would be like doing Mulder without Scully. Like you have to have the two, it's the dynamic between the two that the readers really latched onto. And I mean, I had already planned to do that, but before I started looking at reviews and stuff. And the three big things they said was two biggest things were they really liked the dynamic and the relationship between these two partners, and they really liked the world. And so those were the two main things I focused on. The other thing that a lot of people liked was that they really liked the villain. But the thing with the villain was I couldn't do a Moriarty type villain in every book. Yeah. And in the first book, you kind of know who the villain is by the midway point. You haven't met them yet, but you gotten some taste of them. And so with this book, I decided to go more what I call the Agatha Christie route, where you don't really know the villain is up until the very end. Oh, and nice. And Shelley and Jake think that it's different. One thinks it's a human, one thinks it's a machine, and that you're not sure who's right. So I decided to go more in that route. Now, the only concern with that is that the villain isn't going to be as fleshed out as the guy in the first book who had like pages upon pages to expound his point of view. But I think it also gave me time to really get to know their characters are much deeper in this one, Jake and Shelley. And the villains, really the thing with the villain is that they're manipulating society. And so society becomes the big danger here to our heroes, like directly, physically a danger to our heroes. Nice. And so I thought that was an interesting approach. Just because I couldn't do a Moriarty type villain every book. I thought about it. I was like, that's going to be like too much of a repeat. So
Sure. I never thought of him like more Moriarty villain, but yeah, I like that. I do like, I second that with Jake and Shelley, because Jake comes from that background. When we first meet him, we find out he was sort of more of a desk analyst, in terms of, so he's thinking along the same lines that Shelley's thinking, even they're doing it in different ways. So yeah, they do make a great pair. They do like
the thing with that book is, and with all my books, both the ship and this, I wouldn't say so much of the ship sequels, just because by that time the characters are really fully developed. But I definitely start with archetype characters. I definitely start with trope characters. So you've got in Shelley, you've got the guy who's never been on the field before, and you've got the android detective who has emotions, but there's some tropishness to that. But then if I've done my job right, within 50 pages, you're starting to see, oh no, this is going much deeper than I ever expected it to. So I'm taking those tropey characters. I'm like, well, how can we stretch them? How can we change them? So you start with, oh, I know where this is going. I know who these guys are. Oh, this can be like iRobot. I got it. And then you get pages in, you get to the murder scene, you start seeing these really odd things going on, like stuff. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. This is not iRobot. This is going very different way. Yeah, and the killer is not just a standard robot. It's a different kind of approach, and it's talking about a bigger things.
Yeah, much bigger thing. That kind of plays into Studio Super's chat there. Comment: I do like a villain like Dr. Doom. He has a cliche aim of wanting to rule the world, but the reasoning sets him apart, as he truly believes the world will be a better place under him. Now, when is remind me again the release date for Shelley Murder Mind?
June 18th. June 19th. June 19th. I should know my own release date. June 19th. I believe it's a Thursday. Originally, we released it there because we were going to go to Vegas Comic-Con.
Nice.
But we didn't end up doing it this year.
Okay.
So, because we had kids in camp and all this stuff going on.
Oh,
so
sure.
We didn't do it. But so, it's coming out. All my books release in May or June. So I think actually Shelley came out in April for some reason. That was because we were doing another Comic-Con or something. And then we do LA Comic-Con every year. And it's always nice to see a lot of people coming back and be like, oh, I took a chance on this book and now I want to get the rest and this and that. And that's, so we try to do LA Comic-Con every year.
Is that so the hard copy is released on the 19th, you said? Is the Audible also released? Because sometimes that comes later.
No, the ebook, paperback, and hardcover will release on the 19th. The audiobook probably won't be somewhere around the holidays. It usually takes about 6 months before that gets all done. Maybe a little bit sooner than that, maybe October or November, probably October, something in that area,
Do you think you'll have the same reader? Because she did a great job with all the characters.
Yeah, no, I already talked to her. I'm bringing her back. Yeah, well, she's actually Kelly Tager's like a really well-known. She works for Bantam, I think. I think
I've heard her do some Star Wars books, if I'm not mistaken.
No, she hasn't done Star Wars, but she does a lot. She actually does a lot of like, usually like romance books and stuff. So she jumped at Shelley because she was like, "Hey, killer robots, okay? There's something different." And she really shines. I mean, she really shines with other voices. So yeah, no. As soon as I finished the book, even while we were still formatting, she was my first call. I was like, "Hey, can I?" Because I was amazed that we got her the first time around. So
yeah.
We were originally we had an odd thing happen with the first book. We had a different team that was supposed to do the audiobook, and then they found out there was a single line of Hebrew in it because one of the characters is Jewish, and they bounced out. And then Kelly Tager heard about that and was like, "I'll do it," because I think she's half Jewish or something. She's like,
nice,
and she's like a really big name. I mean, she's like really well known in the industry. And so that worked out really well for us. So I guess there's a case of crazy anti-Semitism working out well in our favor.
Exactly.
But, so it's just, that was a weird situation. So it was like
great.
one line out of 75,000 words. I'm like, really? This is what you're dying on? So
that's great. That's crazy.